Hey there, Amy Demas with Communicate Excellence. It's so great to be with you, and I look forward to the times that we can be together to talk about not only foundational business principles, but also some communication tips and best practices so that you can be successful not only in your office, but in your personal life as well. How happy would you be if I said it is not atypical for a mere 36% of your leads and calls to turn into straight through starts? Shocking? I believe so. Let me first set you up with why this is, why this macro metric has such impact. You know a lot of the micro metrics underneath it, but I want to give you some insight to this macro metric. Straight through processing. What is it? Where is it used? This is used across different industries, but I was first exposed to it when I was working for Bank of America. I came on when we were beginning to take, instead of paper checks from beginning through the process through the end of process, to using images. So, do you remember those days when you used to get that monthly big, thick envelope in your mailbox that had all your canceled checks in it? That's how money moved. Money did not move from person to bank and out of an account unless you actually had paper associated with it. Well, due to 9/11, we fast forwarded into realizing we need to have an alternate way because when the planes were grounded, no money was moving. So, 2016, when I joined the bank, there was an image engineering area where they were now getting ready to go straight through processing. What they were wanting to do is receive an image from a bank or a major business, process the image, send the image cash letters, as they're called, to the feds, and then have that processed. It had taken baby steps all along because you're dealing with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in every single cash letter. So, what the bank did at first was receive the images, print all the paper up, send it on to the Fed until they were sure, hey, everything's going to be okay. They turned it on. Oh no. The Fed, instead of rejecting onesies and twosie checks for us to print as paper, which was anticipated, all of a sudden was returning entire cash letters. And everyone was already overworked. And I had just started working at the bank for 2 weeks. And they said, she's not busy, give it to her. I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do? And they said, we don't know, just fix it. Well, I wanted to make sure that we fix that straight through processing. Image received, image processed, image good enough for us to get our money. Anytime something drops out of the process means there's more work. So there's something for you to consider. What are some of the things that are the advantages of straight through processing? For our benefit, it means there are fewer touch points. Fewer touch points means we get from beginning to end faster and with fewer opportunities for oops and mistakes along the way. But I want you to think of straight through processing also means there's less opportunity for shrinkage, as it's called in the retail space, meaning fewer times for product to disappear along the process. Think about it from our patient's perspective. If they can begin that lead, have that phone call, come in, and then they are ready for treatment and they accept the treatment, that's the fastest way for them as well. And it's the ease of doing business. And it means we have fewer opportunities for error and we have our money in the bank sooner. I want you to think of this. Anything that falls out of straight through processing or the happy path needs a fallout process. And you can be saved by fallout processes, but it's definitely much nicer and happier if we can go from start to finish in a straight line. Let's talk about where that 36% straight through processing for an orthodontic office comes from. comes from lead or phone call to the start. There are some natural gateway points that are along the journey. The first one being from contact to exam. Will they actually come in for that originally scheduled appointment? Meaning they don't reschedule, meaning they don't no show on there. So if they come in, then they continue straight through. But here's what's happening in our industry. If you isolate the missed appointments or even rescheduled appointments for that new patient exam, you're going to find that that number might be 15 to 20% are falling out of the process. And that number is going higher. We have some great instruments and tools for us, such as Gauge, who looks at that kind of number. But I want you to look at each individual. That's going to mean you're going to need to isolate your new patient procedure codes and see how many of those no show or reschedule. Because when you take your new patients compared to all patient codes, you're going to find that the active patient volume distorts what's happening with your new patients. So, why is this actually going higher? In today's world, in our social media world, in our ability to use electronic means to reach out to people, we have more curiosity seekers. Many times, people did not come into the orthodontic office until their dentist referred them. And they were a lot more ready to not only come in to get that evaluation, but being more active in the way that they thought about treatment. Now, as we create these ads and these leads and the Google ads, we have a lot more curiosity seekers that simply want to know how much it costs. And they may or may not show up if we don't strike while the iron is hot. So that number is going higher. Yeah, we got to have some follow up processes for those that reschedule or for those that no show because we want to get them back on the path. Well, that means we have several fall out. Now let's see when they come in, the second hurdle. And that second hurdle is, are they actually ready for treatment? This is, are they going to go observation, recall ready? Are they going to the growth and guidance? Or do they even need to get some dental work done before they are even ready for treatment? All these things are factors. It's not a bad thing when they fall out because they do help build up our reserve of an account for future days. But from a straight through processing perspective, they have fallen out. What I have noticed over the last 10 years is at one point, this used to be 20 to 25% of new patient exams were going into that classification. Nowadays, depending on your practice and location, that number is increasing to 30, 35%, 40%. Whoa, that's a lot. Well, what's causing that? Think about what our parent governing body is recommending and what we're following through on. Ages 7 and up, get that first evaluation at ages 7 and up. So it does provide value. We start to begin that relationship, and it's a wonderful thing. But for the purposes of this macro metric, they do now fall out of the happy path. Then our third gateway point. When we offer treatment, will they say yes? Now, I have a little bit of a soapbox to stand on this one. I like to look at what Rex Stout has says is there's two kinds of statistics, the kind you look up and the kind you make up. When I was working again with the bank, sometimes we would have, we called them decks, we would have PowerPoint decks that someone previously had done, and you didn't have the backup all the data and assumptions on it. And when you tried to reformat the data, you think, how do I get to that number? And so sometimes you have to say, what number do you want me to have? And we would work the assumptions to get to that number to at least recreate a starting point. Sometimes that can happen in our industry. The most accurate way of calculating a conversion rate is to make sure that each person stands alone. If I offered that person treatment, did that person start? Which means you can never have over 100% conversion rate because how did you start more people than you presented to? We tend to get to that number, and I realize and I understand why because it is a simpler way of looking at that. But that has consequences for our treatment coordinators. If you have a startup practice and you have no observation pool to pull from, and you are putting 30 to 40% of the individuals on into observation, my goodness, that poor treatment coordinator's conversion rate is going to be minuscule. Then let's go to the other side, the other end of the life cycle of a practice. Let's say someone is maybe taking their gas off the pedal and we're really not bringing in any new patients, but we're pulling everything from recall ready in our observation program. Well, you have very few new patient exams, but you have a lot of starts because those recall ready start. Now all of a sudden you have 200, 300% conversion rate. And that's not the most accurate way. The assumptions are different than what we want. So when looking at this for this particular metric, I am looking at person by person. I offered you treatment. Did you start? And I mean start right there, committing to an appointment right there, not going home and thinking about it even for overnight. I'm going to use the industry standard of 65% conversion rate for that purposes. I'm going to encourage you to see if you can actually evaluate each person individually. And I do like to allow a 90-day period to convert them, meaning that we're here in March in this example. I can convert February and January's as well as December's before I lock in that conversion rate for that month. So unlike an accounting perspective, that once that December 31st passes, that number never changes, I do allow 90 days for a pending campaign to be effective and impact that conversion rate. What are some ways that you can help that conversion rate? Many of us now have the opportunities to work with sliders, and yes, that does help. What it can do, though, is send some people home pending before they convert, but we're going to convert them very soon afterwards. So that means from a straight through process, they have fallen out. But overall, maybe you want to give yourself the grace of a day or two on that conversion rate. As long as you set your parameters and assumptions consistently, then from month to month, you have the same perspective on that metric. So when we take all that into consideration and you consider people fall out, people fall out, people fall out, what we end up in the orthodontic industry is from 100 phone calls, 36 straight through starts. Whoa, well, how much work does it take to impact this? My theory is that if we can have a better phone call, a better mm, first point entry, and start building that relationship and start having a conversation, then we better prepare them when they come in, which then, as we hand it off to our treatment coordinators for that sales process and mentoring process, they are more ready. They are more convinced that they want to be with us if we can make it possible. And when you get a few more percentage points here and a few more percentage points here, it can be out of every 100 calls, many, many thousands of dollars. And when you consider 2019, what Gage says a single doctor practice new patient phone calls that come in, you tweak those by 2 percentage points on each of those two factors, and all of a sudden, you've got another $250,000 in your bank account this year instead of maybe in the future. What if we could impact a few of those major gateways? That first gateway, will they actually come in without rescheduling, is one we can impact. The middle gateway of are they ready for treatment? They either are or are not dentally ready. So we cannot impact that number. But the conversion rate we can also impact. What would happen if we can make a couple percentage points difference in each of these? It's a multiplying factor to the point that I want you to calculate this for yourself. I'm actually going to provide a link to a handout that you can walk through straight through processing for yourself and figure how you can calculate it for your practice. I recommend doing this once a quarter, a couple times a year, not necessarily on a monthly basis unless you're extremely curious, but you need to have that overview and oversight as to how much extra work are you having to do. And when we make those couple percentage point changes here and there, it means we don't have to spend more marketing dollars to get that phone ring to ring again. Let's simply work them through the process effectively. Play with the numbers yourself and see what happens. Think about improving the money that shows up in your bank account on your productivity books without spending any extra marketing dollars if you can simply convert those that actually expressed initial interest. So, how do you make those couple percentage point changes over time? Coaching, feedback. Think about the goats of sports, the greatest of all time, the Serena Williams, the Michael Jordan, the Michael Phelps, the Simone Biles. They don't get there on their own. They have coaches, feedback loop, so very important because as we're living things live, it's hard for us to have the perspective of what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what we hear. So, whether you have a good person that is an individual coach that you can have, or you hire one of the great consultants, please get that feedback. Keep getting better. Get that outside perspective so that you can make those small changes that will have a synergistic impact on your bottom line. Thank you for your time today and feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to be of service to you. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.